Hey, what's up, dude? It's me, Mr. Airon here, the cool dude here. This is guess what, guys? This is actually my first video of the second, and I'm created of my second channel. So in this is what I'm gonna be doing new in this second channel is I'm gonna be creating the videos of basically what has happened in all the events and around in world history. And so today, in today's video, I'm gonna be learning you guys about the French Revolution. So I'll read you guys over into the about the slides and the presentations, and I'll also give credit and like basically links and documents and Wikipedias and everything you need to like read you can check out and also I'm gonna be creating like videos and by putting their links and their articles, everything they're gonna be in the description in this video that I use to make this presentation. Yeah, so let's get started. All right, so basically, what caused the start of the French Revolution? So the French Revolution was basically had like basically a social, economic, and political change where basically that the aristocrat, like basically that the people in France at the time, like where they were starving today, if there were loss of like harvests, and like there's relations between them and the revolting against the aristocrats, and like basically that they also had to pay a lot of taxes. Plus, then after the American Revolutionary War, after the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, that was won by with the Americans and aligned with the French. They basically France had gotten itself in a huge amount of debt that cost them like 15 billion francs. So that caused a huge financial debt here, and so that's why basically people had been starving to death. The only foods that they could eat is only basically bread, and so that's why the king had also tried to like basically tax to pay a lot of taxes and try to basically raise money. But then like basically the people would then like basically go and raise up and then go to a revolt by then later storming up into the Bastille in later in 1789, which is meant to be a fortress prison, which was then stormed by an angry mob, which basically that they stole all of the cannons and the gunpowder and the prisoners, and that was basically revolted. And then it started to become a celebration in France known as Fête de la Fédération. Okay, so and here is the so here's the timeline of the here that I mentioned, the British that surrendered to the Americans and also the French at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris is signed that ended the American Revolution, and it also recognized America as an independent nation. And plus, by 1789, was also basically the same year in the U.S. that George Washington had become and sworn as to becoming president after they also ratified and signed the U.S. Constitution that the French Revolution started and the Bastille was stormed and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen where it has been also been signed, and that basically gives rights and the equality to all men and women, that also excluded all the rights towards the women during around this time, and it gives also men the rights and also the formals of education. And in 1793, King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were both executed. That basically marked, but by they were executed basically by the guillotine, and after they were released from the prison, and during what is then started the Reign of Terror. And in 1794 is the Robespierre was basically the guy who the group of radicals who started the Reign of Terror, and that over 41,000 people were being executed by the guillotine. Those people were known as like enemies of the revolution, and like basically who were basically against the ideas of like basically the French Revolution, and then he was then basically executed, and like basically the King Charles was then abdicated, and that France had then established basically the Directory, but that Directory was basically like a weak oligarchy, and so people know they have to take a new form of government, and that's why then in 1798, that's where then a French general named Napoleon Bonaparte then takes power and then assigned as first consul. So in the table of contents in this video, we're going to be going over the States General in the Tennis Court Oath, the storm of the Bastille, the proclamation of the First French Republic, and then when Napoleon takes power. So, what is the Estates General? So, here, the Estates General is the legislative assembly that is made to represent the three estates of French society, that is, the commoners, the clergy, and the nobility. After the American Revolution War, it had costed France over 1.5 billion francs, and many people were starving to death, and they didn't have any food or money. Many began its uprising against King Louis XVI and the king that had tried to make taxes on the commoners, and they were then invited to the Estates General, which was taking place in May 5th of 1789, in which the French Assembly advised that the King Louis XVI had to help levying taxes and to make a lot more reforms. But the Estates General, they basically failed because of the first and the second estates. They refused to share power over the third estate, and that's why basically the third estate had then established the tennis court oath, because here the tennis court oath is basically the assent commoners here into the tennis court oath, because it is the royal tennis court oath of Versailles that the third estate's delegates were invited to the assembly, and they had basically sworn oath to a new constitution and create a new constitutional government and founding the French democracy, and the oath to challenge the powers of the French king Louis XVI. And here, there's a storm of the Bastille that marked the start of the French Revolution. That the Third Estate had they took the guards' weapons and seized the Bastille, the fortress prison, which was stormed, and that the masses have flooded into the fortress, they also liberated like 7 prisoners. And I mentioned seizing the gunpowder and disarming the troops, and like it is also a symbol of the domestic powers of King Louis XVI there. And I also mentioned how it's basically marks the first celebration of in France known as the Fête de la Fédération. But it also basically that around this time, many people also had made changes or reforms of their calendar, because of like basically they saw it as basically as like to make it a lot more less religious. And also it was also around these time periods where it basically marked the end of like the aristocrats of were not wearing any white powdered wigs, because they saw it as like basically royalty and like the powers that are connected towards the king. And so then you have the Women's March into Versailles, which is basically that these hungry women here that are basically demanding the bread and for hunger for their families. And they also have been calling in for the king and queen to basically move from Versailles, and in which they were then forced to have to agree. So they did march from Versailles to Paris here. And then there was also the proclamation that the king was then abolished, because like King Louis and Marie Antoinette were trying to basically flee the country from France to all the way to flee them to try to reach up to basically in disguise to reach up their Austrian contacts. But that was basically treason, and they were then caught by the guards, and basically they were then basically got themselves imprisoned, and then they sent to the guillotine. And by the end, after the monarchy was abolished, the proclamation of the French Republic in 1792 was agreed to abolish the monarchy and establish the first French Republic, and the guillotine was used to execute the prisoners for the first time. And so, so the king's execution and the start of the Reign of Terror. So the king and Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette tried to escape in France in disguise, that I mentioned, but they were caught and sent back to Paris, and they were by the armed guard. That all political power is based to the Parliament. In January of 1793, King Louis was executed, and then following by Marie Antoinette 9 months later, and a group of radicals led by Maximilien Robespierre began his ruthless campaigns against aristocrats and other people known as enemies of the revolution. Between 18,000 and 40,000 people were condemned and killed, mostly because of public execution by the guillotine. This is also the Reign of Terror. In 1794, Maximilien Robespierre was then also basically arrested and sent to the guillotine, but not before he was then being shot in the face. So then, like, basically, that after that, they are also the French when they established the Directory, which is basically in 1794-5, the heir to the French throne, Louis Charles, dies in prison, and basically the Jacobins were replaced by a less radical government known as Directory, because it was a weak oligarchy, and people knew that they needed a new central government, in which the Directory was then seized by then it was taken over by a coup, and that was later that was by a French general named Napoleon Bonaparte, who takes the power as the first consul in 1798. And so when like basically Napoleon later becomes the emperor in 1804, and like basically after like basically in the second coalition against the Austrian allies, and basically at the northern Italy in the famous battles like the Battle of Lodi, which basically marched the French into basically launch a charge against the Austrians at the bridge, and basically then until they went to the surrenders, until they also later beat the Allies in later battles like the Battle of the Ulm and the famous battle against the Austrians and Russians at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, and later they also beat against the Prussians against in Jena and Austerstadt, which the French forces then removed their lines before they were able to catch Berlin, and that's where in 1805, that's where in 1804 Napoleon becomes first emperor at the Notre Dame Cathedral, and that the First French Republic collapses and begins the French Empire, which was a key figure in the French Revolution, known as its military campaigns, and later also the Napoleonic Codes, were basically the French that basically gave it into law here, and that Napoleon basically gives his influence over many European politics, and that would later lead to the line of the Third Coalition and the start of the Napoleonic Wars. But that is for another Google Slides presentation. And so yeah, that was basically my first video of the Google Slides of the French Revolution, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And then again, I will be sending in all the videos and also the articles and everything, the sources that I basically used to create all this presentation. So the links will be in the description below if you guys want to check it out for yourselves to learn everything more about the French Revolution. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys did, then and if you want to see more history content like this, then what are you waiting for? Please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you're new, don't forget to comment, and turn on my bell notifications. That way you get notified by every video that I'll be posting in the channel. And yeah, I'll probably be thinking about maybe creating more videos like this. Like I'm thinking about my Google Slides I created, like the one History of the Kingdom of Prussia or the U.S. Constitution, and I'll probably make more others like the history of Russia and about the American Revolutionary War. But if there's other historical events that you guys want me to cover, please also share them in the comments down below. And yeah, and I'll see you guys later. And so I'll see you guys then, and I'll see you in the next video. Mr. Airon's out. Peace.
That the link was had been slain. Chance for peace and justice gone, and the cause has been in vain. The prince has been offended, and